what do you think was something that you found very important when you're sitting down with somebody and you're trying to recruit them?
Number one is authenticity. I never went into the meeting thinking, okay, I'm going to pretend, I'm going to be like this. And I tell everybody, I tell my kids this, when my kids are in a situation where they have to speak. I said, read the room.
Welcome to Real Talk with Gary. If you are listening to this show, that means you are either searching or ready to make a financial change in your life. This show is not only about real estate investing, but also the importance of mindset and the roadmap to a better, healthier life. Learn the daily routines of successful entrepreneurs and the latest market strategies and trends to stay ahead of the curve. Ready for some down-to-earth, north-of-the-border Canadian talk? Here's your host, Gary Hibbert.
All right, welcome back. And today I've got Howard Drukarsh. He is a co-founder of Home Realty Brokerage. He's also the host of the Real Estate Show. And for anybody that may not know this, I actually used to work at Home Realty. I worked there for about 3, maybe 4 years. And this is where I first met Howard. Now, Howard's story is that he's worked for several brokerages where he eventually met the late Arthur Bartram. Hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, before they decided to start Home Realty. And then a few years later, they were introduced to Ron Peddicord. And he essentially possessed the business and financial expertise that they needed to be able to scale up the operation as well as attract investments. And he then became the third co-founder of Home Realty. And then in May of 2004, it was when Home Realty opened its doors for the first time. And then 18 years later, it has grown to become Canada's largest independent brokerage with well over 5,900 agents. So such a huge accomplishment. And so because of that, I really wanted to have him on the show because he has just a wealth of knowledge. And we dive into 3 main areas, which is number one, how to grow and manage a real estate brokerage of that size. And what were some of the growing pains that they went through and experienced? We also dived into tips and strategies specifically for real estate agents on how they can survive the current market that we're in. And then also the mindset required to achieve the goals that you, the listener, have set out to accomplish. So whether it be real estate investment, whether it be you becoming a realtor, whether you becoming whatever business it is that you're trying to accomplish, what mindset do you need to overcome the obstacles that you are definitely going to face? And before we dive into it, don't forget to check me out on YouTube. The link for the show will be in the show notes below. And last, if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a short review. Just real short, doesn't have to be long. But if you love it and you want to make it long, go ahead and please do that. All right, and with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show. And I will talk to you guys next week. Take care. Today's show brought to you by Rent Panda. Rent Panda helps landlords go from listing to lease without wasted time or headaches along the way. Rent Panda provides the do-it-yourself landlord, which is an online platform where you can list your property for free, post your ad on multiple platforms, see tenant profiles, message tenants, schedule showings, get credit checks, build leases quickly and easily. Rent Panda also caters to the more passive landlord who needs to find a tenant, doing all of the leasing work, so all you have to do is sit back and get the best tenants presented to you.
I'd like to get this as a lead into when you. How long does it take you to edit and do all that?
I have no idea because my editor does it for me. And and just so you know as well too, we're live.
What, when we're doing this?
Right now we're live. Hi Howard, how are you doing?
I'll see you, Gary.
Good to have you in here, Howard.
Okay, nice to see you again. We have such a great history. Can I talk about our history?
We can. Why don't we do that?
Okay. So first off, I was the one involved with bringing Gary to the company, Home Realty. And then at some point, Gary left, and I was the one that brought Gary back.
Yes.
And finally, I couldn't bring it back anymore.
You know what was great about that, though? And here's what I loved about it. It was the fact that you actually personally reached out to me, the CEO of Home Realty, and said, Gary, what happened? Talk to me. I tell you what, Gary, why don't you come back in? Let's have a conversation. And I went down to, I think this is your first branch you had down at, was it at Don Mills?
Don, I think we met at the head office on Don Mills, but we have a branch
the head
up
office.
the street. Yeah.
Right. And you brought myself and my wife in, Darlene.
Yeah.
And you brought us up to the boardroom. You introduced us to the deals team and sat us down. We had coffee. We had a great conversation. And I was like, this is great. And he's like, Gary, what can we do to help you? How do we bring you back? What are you looking for? And that really helped a lot. And it showed who the character and the authenticity of who you are.
And I love talking to people who do what I do in the podcast, as you do, I do. I've been a guest on others. And I try to share good ideas. And you've just got a great idea for when, should anyone for some strange reason want to leave our neighborhood, which I can't imagine.
Right.
But should they, you got a bit of a role model that you can use. And it's genuine. Because, as an entrepreneur, how do you correct your business if you don't know why someone left? Right. It's critical. So that's the other thing. When we started our business, we had no agents, none.
Yeah.
My wife's an agent, but she's takes care of the kids. So we started with no agents, and me and my late partner Arthur Bartram and my business partner Ron Peddicord just thought timing was good for a model, and then we had to grind it out till we grew to the size we are.
What year did you start?
2004.
2004. Okay.
And so, when I meet with entrepreneurs, I feel like a kinship. When I'm looking at you, I'm thinking, you've been through some of the battles, maybe all of the battles. And I just love doing this as a guest. As a host, I've done over 50, and that's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
But I've never done it live. So now I'm under a lot of pressure.
Well, it's not live. We do release it at a later date, but it feels live because I get the cameras and the mics and everything that's going on here. But here's what I do want to get into. And I think I want to kind of break this up into 3 parts. So I think one, I want to kind of talk about what it was like growing your brokerage. Then I want to dive into maybe some tips that you've learned over the years for realtors, and then get into the mindset.
Sure.
Because I think people forget how important the mindset is. And so what got you into starting this brokerage? And I think one of the reasons also too is I reached out to you because we're at this point of we're almost there where I feel like we're about to grow it bigger, but we don't know what to do. And sometimes it's good to reach out to people and ask them. You were probably at that particular point. How did you overcome it? But let's kind of start from the beginnings, and we'll get into where we are today with you.
So I have to attribute, my decision to leave 20 years of a successful real estate career to start this business into an enormous amount of naivety.
Okay.
Without that naivety, I would have never done it because I was a real estate agent and I had a success, and I had a referral business, and I was happy. My late partner, Arthur Bartram, was the manager of the LePage, Johnston and Daniel office. I was an agent there. We'd known each other for many years. He came back and showed me this purple piece of paper with the model, 100% model that we designed for Toronto. And I thought, as an agent, I would go for this. That was sort of the way we started.
And when you say 100% model, just for people who don't know, so no commission split.
100% model plus there was a monthly fee. Those are the only 2 expenses. And we could be here for 2 days if I told you all the things we had to overcome. In the U.S., agents don't want to go through call centers. They want to do all the calls directly to themselves. So this is back in 2004. Technology was different. So we set up our business where the agents for sale sign had an extension number, so you would call the agent directly.
Okay.
We almost closed. Agents wanted a call center. We hadn't planned for a call center. So that's number 1 hurdle. Then we had to find a call center that could handle what we wanted to do. And we grew rapidly because there was no other model like ours in 2004, 5, 6. Now there's tons. But they couldn't grow to the scale. And you bring up a good point about how do you get past certain levels. Anyway, we had 1 call center, we outgrew them. Had a second call center, we outgrew them. We realized the only way that we could scale it was to have our own call center. We'd
Right.
never run a call center.
Now, when did this happen? Because there's obviously a year when that happened, because you probably just had it more. It wasn't just people calling the front desk?
Well, the call center handled calls and handled booking, like a lot of the call centers.
Okay,
right?
so that was when you outsourced it to the call center.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
we did it right away because that's what agent want. They wanted what they're used to. They wanted, call goes to the call center calls them, texts them, whatever. So
Got it.
we had to do what the market was. So we did that. But we didn't expect that we'd grow to where now we had to grow our own call center. So we had to be in the call center business.
And what point in your business of how many agents did you have when you were starting to break at the seams?
Hundreds, maybe 1,000.
Right.
We have,
Yeah.
when I say this, I say it with more disbelief than the person listening to me because we have almost, I think we have 5,900, close to 6,000.
Which is absolutely incredible.
It is incredible. When I started, I had dark hair like you.
Hey, mine's getting close to yours, Howard. I'm not that far off, brother.
But you know what? I attribute the success to I got along great with Arthur, my business partner. Got along great with Ron, our business. Arthur was my active partner. He took on the role of broker of record because I hadn't done that. And as we opened offices, I became the manager. But I'd learned kind of watching Arthur how to do that. And so as we opened Mississauga, we opened Richmond Hill. I would go in as the manager, and I'd work with the branch administrators. And so I had really good training from he had managed the J&D office. It was the number one brokerage success in rural LePage, the best manager to work and learn from. So we continued to run into obstacles that we hadn't anticipated. So your point about mindset, it is all about mindset. Mm-hmm. It is all about you don't give up. It is about having a sense of how do you deal with the stress. And for Arthur, myself, and Ron, the stress came out in humor. At the end of the day, I'd sit with Arthur. We laugh our heads off because everything was so crazy.
Right.
But we never got depressed like, oh, this won't work.
Now, when did you bring Ron in? Like, did Ron help kind of change the trajectory of your business? Did he bring something different in? Like, was he a realtor? Where did he come from?
Great question. How do you know all these good questions? You
Man,
must do this.
I study you, brother. I study you. I like to at least do a little bit of research on my guests.
I'm not going to be able to get through that door. My head's going to be so big, you'll have to sideways. Here's how we got really successful. Arthur and I had tried to raise money a few different ways. We wrote a business plan, a couple of pages, and we tried to raise money. And no one would really understand what we're trying to do. No commission, how are you going to grow? They didn't understand the scaling idea, right? And through a friend of mine, I was introduced to Ted Manzieras. Ted was the former owner of Turtle Island, which then became GFL. And Ted thought, these guys have a good idea. Ron Peddicord is a friend of mine who just retired from, he was executive vice president at Cadillac Fairview. We had, I love this because this is the romantic story.
Right.
We met at the Mars restaurant in Toronto.
And Cadillac Fairview, what did they do?
They're a huge developer.
Okay.
Gigantic developer.
So he had a development background.
Yes.
Interesting.
At the executive level. So not,
Right.
he's very smart business, finance, HR, really had all those
So that's
skills.
interesting. Yeah. So you're bringing somebody in that had a larger vision.
Exactly.
Not so much into the weeds.
Exactly right, Gary. Because Arthur and I would have grown a nice business. We would have had a nice brokerage because we knew what we were doing. People joined us, but never to the scale. Now, here's where our, Ron comes in really important. He likes us. He had just retired, quite young. He decides he'll write the business plan. Our business plan was a couple of pages. His business plan was like this. So he wrote a tremendous business plan. Then he went to his colleagues, people who knew him, and mostly they would invest just because of Ron. Ron had been successful. And I went to a few of mine, and Arthur went to a few of his. So we started off unlike any other brokerage. We started off with a plan to scale it up. I don't know if we ever thought we'd get to 6,000, but we knew we knew the model was scalable, right? And with Ron there to be the finance person, to deal with whatever HR issue, he had all this experience. And it was fun working together. And we worked through all the problems. You know this yourself. Whether you're an agent or whether you're, in your case, record president, every day you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You get up and go, what's going to happen today?
Yeah, every day is a journey.
Every day is a journey, and
Yeah.
some are better than others.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you try your best to plan out your day, but sometimes things get thrown in there where it just completely changes it. Right. Now, Ron came in what year?
He came in 2004. We didn't start the company till Ron
so
was
he was
there.
there right at the beginning. Almost.
He's one of the founders. The three founders, myself,
Got it.
Arthur, and Ron.
Okay.
So right from the beginning, we had his expertise.
But you know what I found interesting though, because I joined Right at Home in 2014, and I'm trying to remember how many offices you had at the time. I think there's only 2 or 3. It was Oshawa. No, sorry, it was Whitby. You had Whitby, then you had Toronto, and then the Whitby one closed down and went to Oshawa.
Right.
But I think there was only 2 at the time.
There was also Richmond Hill.
Okay.
Mississauga.
Oh, so you had, okay.
And all of our offices were designed to look like it was a franchise. In other words, they all have the same design look. They all have the same graphics. And people in the beginning, because our model was so affordable, people thought we were virtual, right? And so the office design was to let people know we're a real office, and you can come in, you can work at the office. There's a manager in every office. The other thing we decide, our managers don't sell, because that's a real bad perception from an agent's point of view. So we compensate the managers well. I think, the plan changed a bit, but they can obviously do family, but, they're not out there. Can you imagine it's a multiple offer and your manager is one of the other agents.
Right.
It's not going to be good.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, right? So you compensate them well. Yeah. Say, listen, this is what you do. You manage the office. Right. You help with the recruiting.
Exactly.
But no more sales for you.
Yeah, exactly. Sales was...
Because now you're not competing with any of the other agents in the office.
Yeah. So I think that all of this worked well, and it helped us create integrity about our model. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is our approach to hiring agents was we're scale. Like, you know this from the business. You've seen agents as I have. You can't believe they're still working at a brokerage given their quality of service or things that happen in the background relating to RICO. We figure if we have one less or one more, what's the difference? So we didn't have a problem terminating people. That's also important because your reputation is everything, right?
Right.
And we had some real, we had some people. What do we have? We had here's a good one. We had someone, I get a phone call one day from City TV. Like, hey, this is fantastic. I'm going to get some free press. But before I got too far into it, what they were calling about is one of our agents had got really mad at a client and painted their door in their car.
Jeez.
And they were looking for paint.
Right.
But, these are the crazy things.
Now, was there a point, though, I guess what I'm trying to get at right now is when you were growing, you start off with no agents.
Right. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We went to Morton's in Toronto, expensive steakhouse, when we had 10. We thought we just broke the single digit.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's a milestone. You're like, okay, we've got something here.
Exactly.
But when was that real growth? Was it 100 agents? Was it because all of a sudden I think you just exploded?
We were, for the first, it's interesting because once we started to have offices, I remember mostly the Mississauga office. So let's say we started in 2004. I think 2 years later, 2006, we opened Mississauga. And that's when things started to really, just really explode. I would have, we had a boardroom, and I would instead of recruiting one person at a time, I'd have 2 or 3 in there. I'd go through my presentation about Right at Home, and then I'd bring in the branch administrator to do the paperwork. And this was kind of not too uncommon. Sometimes I'd have to have one person in one boardroom where they were transferring different things they're interested in, one person that's new. Did you ever see the movie Bugsy Siegel?
I haven't.
Okay. Where he's a gangster in it. He's trying to be in a room with his colleagues, and then he's trying to be a cook because it's at his home with his family. And he's like walking between rooms. And I keep thinking this is just like in that movie. Like I had to have a hat on here and a hat on there.
Right. Now, what about the broker of record? Did you just have the one broker record? Was there one for different offices?
Because, for RICO, there has to be one.
Okay.
We're not a franchise.
Right.
So all of the offices were under one broker of record. Arthur was broker of record until his untimely passing. Then I became broker of record and president. And then after he passed, I was pretty shaken up and didn't want to take on that role. So we brought in a president who also took on the role of broker record. We brought another president. We've had another president. And so being an entrepreneur, what you want to do is you want to be involved in the company. And the role of the president, what's your official title here?
I'm a partner.
Okay. Who's the broker of record?
Louis Lamaris.
Okay. So the broker of record has all the responsibility relating to the business, right? The president has the responsibility of growing the company. In a small brokerage, in a franchise, there's a broker of record. There's no president. Usually not, because it's not a corporate setup in the same way.
Right.
What I didn't say earlier was how we set up the company was right from the beginning, we had a board of directors.
Okay. So now you had investors involved in contributing funds.
Right.
And so how large was this board of directors? And kind of maybe just walk us through this. They now have say in the direction of the way that the business is going to run and operate, correct?
Yeah. In the beginning, the board of directors was myself, Arthur, and Ron.
Okay.
And then we started to add all of our board members were investors, and we started to add different people with different skill sets. And that sort of contributed to, different viewpoints on how we run the company. And so we never operated it. And just like a corporation, the president would report to the board, just like Esso, just like, any large corporation. Right. So, and Ron, because of his financial background, set up all the accounting systems. And whenever anyone's looked at how efficient we are, it's tribute to him. We have monthly reports, Monday reports, Friday reports. We're on top of what's going on in the business thanks to him.
Right. So how big was the board, and what were some of the key players that you guys brought in along the way?
They were all the board changed over time. That's the other thing with boards, and so they weren't really there to contribute in the day-to-day because they weren't real estate people per se.
Right.
But it was more like from the scaling idea. What could they contribute in terms of how do we grow this? It was always scaling. Or even now, that's our plan, right? So that's what they contributed. But they weren't operational.
Right.
That was up to the president. I guess myself, Ron, and when Arthur was there, we ran the business.
So what were some of the skill sets you were looking in some of these partners or investors? Because they're investors that you're bringing in,
yeah.
But they would also maybe contribute some ideas because you said, hey, look, we need to find good locations for some of these branches that we're trying to open up and build.
All Ron.
Oh, Ron! Wow. Okay.
When Ron sees this, he's gonna think I never told him how great he was. But
right.
You mentioned when we talked about getting together. I think you mentioned about the Don Mills branch.
Yes.
So we had an office at Don Mills. When we started out, we had one office on the second floor. It was it's kind of warm memories. We had deal processing, although we didn't have many deals, so it wasn't very busy. And at the back of that same room, we had a bunch of computers where agents could come in and work. So we had one room. Then as we grew, we didn't want deals and agents together. So that's on the second floor. We took space on the first floor. And then we made that into the branch so that the deal processing, as it grew, there wasn't people coming and going in that area. But then then we outgrew that. So then, and again, our best location ever was we took the end unit it was a new development then, just south of the Toronto Real Estate Board, right next door. And we put our signs up. And as you know, everybody who gets registered or licensed, if they're joining TREB, they have to go there for orientation.
Right.
So everybody had to drive by and see our signs. And it was it was brilliant. Because it's like banks want signs on corners. Well, we were next door to TREB. I'm not sure in those days Trepp thought it was fair that we had such a good location.
Right.
I can't remember.
And you did have really good locations, right? Now, what would you, like if you were to give advice to somebody who was named Gary and somebody who was a broker record named Louie and somebody who was the founder named Rhonda, I don't know if these are just imaginary characters.
Very interesting names.
Right.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them at a point in building this brokerage? They've got almost 160 agents. What should they focus on? Where do they really pay it? What should they be paying attention to?
You know, it's interesting. We always thought that 200 agents was the number when other brokerages similar to our model would have to reinvest. Right. Okay. And you're probably experiencing some of that, I'm guessing, because, managing 200 agents, you can kind of do it depending on the agents, how many are new, how many are experienced. Space requirements, it's another thing. So what advice would I give? I think it all comes down to understanding the financial picture, what you're trying to do. Because if you have to reinvest, you have to understand, how much do you have to reinvest to get where you want to go? And, you don't want to be burdened by debt. Like there's always some. That was the other thing about our business. Because we raised enough funds to get going for 2 years, which is when we broke even, we never had bank debt. So we weren't burdened every week with dealing with the bank.
Right.
But I think it's a real tough question because it's very individual. Okay. Like each of you and your partners have to decide, there's no standing still in life or in business. You're either going forward or going backward, right? And you're at the point where you want to go forward. And so to go forward, it's a question of many things. Do you need to hire more support people? That's a good question. Do you need like an assistant branch manager who can take off some of the burden of dealing with agents and issues and all of that, which allows somebody to continue to recruit. I mean, recruiting is the lifeblood of this business, right?
Right.
If you don't have agents, you don't have deals.
Right. So focus some time on the recruiting part of it. And you also touched on something that I thought was important because I used to work at TD Bank. And one of the things we always used to have was meetings and reports. Yes. Meetings and reports. And also I worked not at the branch level, but in the IT department. Mm-hmm. And so there was a standard called ITIL, which was you'd have change management. So you're always making changes within the company. Then those changes would create an incident. Mm-hmm. And then that incident then would eventually get resolved. And then you'd have a problem resolution to saying, what did we learn from that? What are the new things that we put in so that we don't have that problem again? Right.
Same idea. Yeah. I mean, the monthly reports, it's P&L, so we understand our position. The Monday reports are a summary of deals in, deals closed, recruiting. The Friday report is heavily recruiting, like what happened during the week, who joined, who left. And to your point earlier in the discussion, when I started to call people who left, I wasn't sure if I wanted to really, I didn't know how I'd feel about doing it. As soon as I started to do it, I really enjoyed it because it's, most people, to your point of how you felt, most people were glad to have somebody call them who had an interest in them. That's what it came down to. I was either president or I was co-founder, whatever the role was, and that was important. And I've always felt that, people of that level, presidents or brokers of record, I've heard such funny stories. I've heard where somebody told me I won't use the brand so I don't get sued and you don't get sued. But, someone leaves and the owner will call them and yell at them. It's a very small chance they'll come back. Yeah. And here's the other thing about people leaving. You want to know why they're unhappy because they're going to tell everybody why they're unhappy. Yes. Right? So 100%. It's critical. And you want to, when someone joins, that's easier because you also want to speak to people who join, which I did, because they're going to tell you why they joined and what made them happy about joining. Why did they leave the other? It's all about intel. Like, why did they leave where they were and how come they came to us? Right.
Now, who did most of the recruiting? Was it, so you, but not only that, what about the agents in the brokerage.
Yeah,
because I remember that there was incentives when I was at Home Realty that, hey, look, if you bring somebody in, we're going to give you a little bonus.
Exactly. It was it changed off and on, but I think it ended up being a deal fee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But when I was the recruiter, and honestly, Gary, I'm sure I've recruited thousands of agents because I did it for 16 years.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing that I learned. When I talk to entrepreneurs, there's just like there's a special bond that we understand the challenges. We understand we took the risk. Operational people like presidents, it's a little different. They can be really good at or not good at operations, depending on the person, but they don't have the same passion. And that's a really different part. Mm-hmm. Just like for you, you go to bed, you think of the company, get up, you think of the company, right? It's your baby, it's your company.
Right. I
never lost that feeling. Even now, it's a real treat when managers call me and say, "Why aren't you coming out? Come on." I retired in 2020 to do my own podcast. And I like to go out because I can go out to every office and remember it when it was raw space, before we even had an office there. And then like you, wrestling through, should we stay where we are? Should we go to another location? Is it worth the money to get street level? There's a million decisions.
Right. And it's not just passionate. And so whatever you're doing, you have to have passion, I think, number one.
Right.
And then number two, what do you think was something that you found very important when you're sitting down with somebody and you're trying to recruit them? Because you have to, people can smell when you're trying to sell something to them, right? So there's obviously an art to it. What did you learn over the years to be very successful in that?
Really good. You have really good questions. Have you done podcasts?
I've done a couple of them.
Okay. So that's about as good as any question about recruiting. Number one is authenticity. I never went into the meeting thinking, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm going to be like this. And I tell everybody, I tell my kids this when my kids are in a situation where they have to speak. I said, read the room. And read the room can be as simple as me sitting across from an older person, a younger person, a male, a female, whatever, culture differences. So I go in there and I kind of try, just like you do, try to understand them a bit, find out, what are they looking for? Why are they interested? And then I talk about what we have to offer. And I never closed, to use that, that hackneyed expression. I never closed on someone in the room because I just thought that's so old school. It won't work. I remember when I was first into the business, I would go into offices where I was interested in joining, and they wouldn't let me out the door.
Until you signed a paper or agreed that you're gonna sign up,
So I thought that's never going to work in this day and age because people are too sophisticated, they're too smart. Yeah. New people coming in. You've probably hired new people. What I love about new people finishing the licensing course is they give them questions to ask the broker. And the questions could take the broker a couple hours to answer. When they started that, I thought this is really going to be a tough road. Yeah. But I tried to get to the important questions. Transferring people have a different story. They're leaving somewhere because there's a better opportunity somewhere else, or they're unhappy. I always tried to find out what were they unhappy about, because that helps us improve and change. I'd say I'm trying to think of, I used to do this every Friday and I'd make notes so I could present that to the board. I can't really remember percentage wise. Some people just wouldn't answer the call, because they don't want to talk about the past. When they did answer the call, they would talk. That's my experience. And I would listen. I wasn't there to of course I'd like them to come back, but that's at their own time.
Yeah.
And this is something I would tell when I was president, and even now, when I talk to managers, I tell them, because again, this, every day someone's trying to recruit your branch administrators. Every day someone's trying to recruit your agents. So you've got to think of that when you talk to your people. Like, you can't just assume they're going to stay.
And what do you think you did well to keep those agents there? Was it the education? Was it social events? What do you think really allowed them to want to stay? Was it a family environment?
Yeah, well, as we scaled, hard to know.
Yeah, because
6,000 people.
When you get that big,
right?
You have people that are now in your brokerage that you never even met.
Right? Isn't that bizarre?
It is. It's incredible.
So I think what we did well, and we had to learn. This was a learning experience for us in hiring managers. We made mistakes like everybody. Ron says if you hire 50% well, you're doing well. The odds are pretty weak. But because I'd spent my whole career in Arthur in real estate, we kind of knew what we were looking for. And again, Ron's point is everyone interviews well, right? You know that,
right?
So we would hire the managers we thought would work, but then we'd find out they didn't work, and we'd have to change. And we would just kind of improve the staffing. To your point of what did we do well, we hired managers that were service oriented, that liked helping people, that liked talking to people. And that had to extend to the senior level, like to, presidents had to like, or they were going to fail because it's a people business.
Right.
And some were better than others at that. Simple people business, right?
Now, looking back at what you've built and what you've accomplished, which is absolutely incredible.
I can't believe it. I'm going to interrupt because when people say that to me, the thing I think about most is we had an idea and it worked. That's about as big in real estate or in business to have an idea that worked. You know how many business start and don't make it?
I know, a lot.
So that's my big thrill out of this, is that we had an idea that worked.
What do you think is the number one thing that attributed to it working? Drive, hard work?
Passion for the business, knowledge, integrity, a plan. And I think the real success for our business was the three of us together. We had more horsepower. Arthur had great experience running brokerages. Ron understood corporate. I was good in the area of dealing with people and sales and managing, and we all trusted each other to do what's best for the company.
Right.
And so it's magical. I mean, it was magical.
And you know what I hear when you say that is that you partnered with people that brought in different strengths,
right,
and complemented each other along the journey.
Right.
Right. And that's important.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know how else to put how important that was. When Arthur passed away and we'd worked together 2011 for 8 years. We'd work together. We'd meet this is another technique he came up with. I was managing either Richmond Hill. Yeah, I was managing the Richmond Hill office. He was still managing he was broker of record at Don Mills. So every lunch hour, I would meet him at the Treb cafeteria, and we'd have a regular table. And we'd sit there and meet agents, talk about right at home, which I think became common for other brokerages to do. But then after he passed away, I didn't do it anymore. It wasn't the same. But I think it was just simply a passion for what we did and fun. We had fun.
That's such an important part of the business, isn't it? And I think people missed that part. And it sounds like he was an important part of your life and your business. And that must have been really devastating.
Terrible, devastating. Because, the tribute to our friendship was we became better friends the longer we worked together. Most people, when they have a partner, it goes the other way, like a divorce over time could go the other way. So that was really the hard part for me. But then there was still Ron. And Ron and I got along, and we continued to do what was right for the company. So it wasn't like, and I've talked to it's interesting, there's a couple of brokers who were with us, like yourself, left and started their own brokerage. And, I liked them when they were with us, and I still, I guess in a casual way, consult. And I told her, one of the people I talked to, because she's finding it overwhelming on her own. I said, it would be. Like, I don't think, and Arthur knew, he said, I'm not going to do this on you unless you come in, because he knew how hard it would be, right? You have partners, so it's a little better than someone trying to grow. Although it depends. If you want to grow a boutique, it's different if you want to scale up.
Well, one of the things that I remember listening to, and people know this, I love Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn was, I think, somebody who really helped change and really teach me the importance of mindset.
Okay.
He was a philosopher and coach, mentor. And he said, when you're starting a business, you can go so much further if you can do it with other people.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people that are in the corporate world and are thinking about starting a business, they always say, well, don't do it with friends or don't do it with families or be careful partnering with people. But I think really what it comes down to is understanding what it is that you're trying to build, what you're looking for in a partner, right? And just maybe sometimes even just writing it down.
Sure.
I don't know if that was something that you did, to saying, this is what I want in a partner, this is what I don't want in a partner.
I was very intuitive. I've always been intuitive. That, I think, is one of my best strengths. And I think that's really important in life. So I think I pretty well could read someone pretty quickly. I got fooled a few times. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Fortunately, not with my wife. She is perfect.
They are all perfect.
She is
mine too.
She is. Yours is perfect. Mine is perfect. So when Rosemary sees this, she'll be happy. But I think that's another thing about recruiting or hiring. You can read a resume, and everybody has resumes, and you can even look at what someone did at other companies, as we've done when we've hired presidents. Doesn't mean they're going to work for you, because everyone's different. Yeah. So you have to go with that, and you have to expect you'll make mistakes. But to your point of having a team mentality, Gary, it's magic that people get along, enough to advance the same idea. Yeah. And the other thing is life gets in the way.
Yes.
Things happen in people's lives, good and bad. And you have to just keep every day moving forward. For sure.
What are your thoughts on the economy today? How can agents navigate through these times? Because it's different. I mean, I know history repeats, but there's something different about this one. It's not the same. We're in a recession, maybe not in a recession. How do they navigate through all this and higher interest rates?
Okay. Well, when I started in the business, the idea of working with a buyer, nobody cared. So you got a buyer, who cares? It was all about getting listings. So
right.
The skill set...
List to survive?
List to last.
Or list to last, right. Yeah.
The skill set you needed was how to present to a seller where there's other people to help them feel you're the right person for them. Once you got a listing, then, it had to be presentable and saleable, not just a listing. So it had to be, a listing that would actually sell. Otherwise, it's worse, because then every other day the sellers ask you why aren't there showings, like it was hell, you're creating a hellhole for yourself. So you have to get a well-priced listing and showable. So that was always my focus during my selling years. Then buyer brokerage came out. Now, buyer brokerage, it became an easier way for agents because you don't have to learn technique, right? Technique is you meet with a buyer and they like you and they trust you and they show you homes. But the whole business is upside down now because the commission rates used to be 5 or 6%, and half goes to the listing broker and half to the buyer's agent. Now it seems like the listing percentages have gone down and the buyer percentages stay the same. So working for a seller, you'll make more money working for a buyer in a lot of cases, right? So that's a different mindset. But I think the key is people may misunderstand why it's so important to work for a seller, because it gives you opportunity. You get a listing, it's opportunity to door knock and tell people you've just got a new listing, which could create more activity. Mm-hmm. It gives you an opportunity to send flyers to the neighborhood, tell people you've got a new listing. People in the neighborhood are always interested. They always ask. I'm sure wherever you live, even if it's not your neighborhood, they'll say, Gary, there's a house for sale in Pickering or in Burlington. What's it worth? Right. Like they expect you to know everything. So using it to create more business is why listing's so important.
Right.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah. What about an agent now? And they're going in, they're going to maybe potentially get their listing, but they say, well, I've my uncle's a realtor. Hey. My aunt's a realtor. How do you overcome that? Because that's difficult.
Not at all.
Oh, well, you're the wizard. What would you do? How would you say it?
Okay, so let's role play. Okay.
So Howard, listen, I would like to list with you. Unfortunately, I've got an uncle. He's really good. And I got to go with him.
All right. So Gary, in addition to the fact that you have your uncle, is there any other reason you wouldn't list with me?
That's really about it.
Yeah. Do you feel I'm professional?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think I could do a good job for you?
I think you can.
Gary, here's the thing in real estate. People never list with a relative or a very close friend because if something goes wrong, that person is held responsible forever.
Ooh, I like that. So now I got to go see my uncle at Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, and something went wrong. Yeah.
So Gary,
that's a good point.
Listen, here's the listing form. Just sign down here.
Sold. I'm sure that works.
It works because it's true.
It is true.
But language
true.
I learned that, Gary, I learned that language 30 something years ago. And I studied language, real estate, languages, like things to say to. Here's another thing for agents to recognize. If you have more answers to objections than they have objections, you win. But not the other way around.
Yes.
So I memorized books on how to handle every objection. And I didn't in the beginning. I came out of marketing. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in sales. My wife and I thought real estate would be interesting. Again, a big naive move, but it worked out because we worked well together. But once I started to realize language technique is really important and not canned, not so someone goes, oh, that's a canned language. No, language that will help people make good decisions, right? And once I had memorized this language, like I knew how to handle every possible objection in the world. I would go into the listing presentation. I'd worked hard at learning the language. I'd hope they'd give me an objection. Otherwise, when would I get to use it?
Right.
So I was very confident.
And you know what that does as well, too, is that it continues to build your skill sets, the way that you can answer a question, and it gives confidence to them, as it's saying that Howard knows what he's talking about.
Right.
He answered almost all my questions. But that has to come with experience.
Yeah,
you have to go in knowing that you're not going to know all the answers in the beginning, but you got to keep doing it. It's 10,000 hours.
You don't know what you're doing the first deal you do. I mean, you got lucky. Our first Rosemary, one of our first few deals, we go there. We were the listing agent. Mm-hmm. We get the offer from the other side, and they see the price, and then the deposit was a I don't remember the year. Let's say a 1962 Mercedes.
Okay.
We look at each other like, what do? We call the manager and said the deposit is a car. The more deals you do, the more experience you have in what can happen. And it's so emotional at the transactions.
So emotional.
So, and I'm sure you've had these experiences. If it's a divorce, it's so emotional, it's almost unbelievable. In the old days, because I come from the old days, you would present in person. So you're presenting to the husband and wife at the same time. It wasn't good. It was terribly stressful. Now, most people just, they email the deal in, and it's done via technology, so it's not the same.
Yeah, that's really changed. You've seen a lot of big changes throughout the years, right? Where you had to go into a listing presentation with 3 offers.
Right. People sitting in the basement beside you, right, with the same offer.
Yeah.
Sitting in their car waiting to come in.
Yeah.
But looking back, and the irrevocable was 11:59, right? So nothing would happen. You have to be there all night sometimes.
Yes.
But if you were tired, Rosemary and I always said this: you're exhausted when you're doing a deal, right? And very tired. But if it goes through, you come home happy. If it doesn't go through, this was a bad day.
Yeah.
Because you're drained.
I know. You'd have like cars lined up outside and one person come in, another one, and you're trying to figure out like, okay, does he walk in with confidence? Does he have a good offer in his hand?
There's so many good stories. I'm going to interrupt because this is one of my very good friends. He's a very successful lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And he does litigation. So he's a tough guy. So we're representing him. He lived across the street at the time. And I said, okay, listen, this is how it's going to work. The agent's going to come in. They're going to present the offer. I'm going to give it to you. We won't say anything. Let the agent leave the room. And then you and I will talk. He says, okay. Agent comes in, offers, what the hell is this? I said, good memory. You remembered everything I told you. We're still friends today.
Yeah, that's good. Howard, looking back at your life,
Yeah.
what would you change? What would you do different?
I saw that question and I thought to myself, I don't think, and this sounds corny, but if I had changed anything, I would have never got to where I am, right? The failures and the missteps you learn from. I think if I had that question, I answered, I'd change this. That wouldn't have been a good way to answer your question. I honestly think I've learned from, listen, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them. And that's, this too. That's the key to a mistake. You learn from it. If you don't learn from it,
right,
it's not good.
Yeah, you're right. Because if something works out exactly how you planned it to work out, well, that's success. But you didn't learn anything from it because you planned it and it worked exactly how it was supposed to. It's where you learn from the mistakes and the missteps and and I think some of those times are that's the most valuable things that you get out of it. Right. I think they're gifts.
Yeah, I think people look at failure the wrong way. That's another kind of a personal thing. Mm-hmm. And I used to tell my kids, it's okay you got to fail, because if you fail and you recover, you can handle failure. People are afraid of failing. Yeah. And I never was. And I think that to some degree, maybe it's the parenting I had. I don't know. But, I had a lot of mistakes, but look where I ended up. Like my road to success worked out because I overcame, like nobody has an easy life. There is no such thing. You don't know what's going on in the background, right? But you have to have confidence that you can overcome things. I think, and that comes with maturity, right? I wasn't like this in my 20s. No. Or 30s.
No, you're looking for the next club.
Right. And now that I'm in my 40s, as you are.
Yes, right? Yeah.
So that's what I think is important. Understanding failure is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Being authentic, critical, important, and work with people you like. You may have heard this in training courses, but I remember most sales trainers would say, you don't have to like your clients. I couldn't work that way. My rule of thumb on picking a client, if they were going to call me at 8 a.m. and 11 p.m, I'm going to have to like them. And that's what they do, right? When you have a client. So I would only work with people I liked. Probably could have made more money, but I enjoyed the business better.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed when I became a realtor and left the corporate world. I remember driving around with clients, and I was like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this.
Isn't that great?
I was like, and it's a sunny day. I got the top open. I got my shades on. I'm playing my tunes. And I'm like, eventually I'll probably get paid for a deal. And I'm hanging out with somebody new that's becoming a friend. And we're having a good time looking for one of the largest investments they'll ever make in their lives.
Right. And I know the way you said it, I know it happens to you. These people become your friends because you dealt with a very emotional situation with them. And as a result of that, you get to know each other. Yeah. That's what I found. I'm sure, knowing you, I'm sure that I'm sure everybody you deal with wants to be your friend. So you're in good shape, Gary.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Howard, listen, I've enjoyed this conversation with
Likewise.
you. Is there any last piece of advice that you can share that maybe shaped and changed your life that could maybe help and inspire somebody that's listening?
Well, this just came to me as you asked me the question. I think that was really important for me to succeed is to have the support of my wife, because you're out of the house. We didn't have kids for 10 years, so it wasn't like that. And then once we had kids, she backed out to take care of our kids. But not only was support of my wife, but she was my partner. So if we were out late, I was with her. If we were, doing business, I was with her. So I never felt that pull. And I know a lot of agents have that pull, about being back where the kids are, or their husband or wife is wondering, why don't I see them? You don't do this business 9 to 5 and succeed. It's 24/7. And I think that's really important. Some people want to do a couple deals and then leave and relax. And that's fine for them. I mean, everybody gets what they want out of this business. I wanted more than that. So I put a lot into growing a company with my partners. Along the way, there were some difficult times, particularly with people, people who disappointed you. That's one of the, you know this from life. People who you thought had integrity had no integrity. Things that you thought, wow, I'm really surprised. I never had it with my partners. So that was the only thing that really mattered to me.
Okay.
So I think that's the final thing. If you're going to get into real estate and you want to be super successful, it's going to be a lot of hours. And there's no shortcut.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to ask this question. I've never asked this one before in the podcast is you're looking at me and you say, Gary, here's the advice I would give you with growing this brokerage and making sure you're doing the right things moving forward because you still got time ahead of you. What was the advice you'd give me?
First off, I think you've done terrific. So that tells me you're already successful, right? Or you wouldn't have our neighborhood realty. And I always compliment people who take the leap to be the leap of faith to be an entrepreneur. So you can do well in this business. Now it's a really personal thing. It's personal in that where do you want to take your business? Because you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already proven. You've got a great business here, right?
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Howard, this was great. I really enjoyed it. If people want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, you've also got a great show as well, too.
All right. Let me plug my own podcast.
Yeah, do that. Please do.
So my partner in the podcast, Adam Price, he built a studio. This is how life works. I retired from managing it right at home. Thought, what am I going to do? About a week later, Adam, who knew me, had been at Right at Home, contacted me and said, things fell apart with my host. Do you want to host a podcast? I said, okay, but what does that mean? He says, just, do a few, you'll get used to it. So we started doing the podcasts. The podcast, and again, he came up with the title, so it's easy to remember. It's Real Estate with HowardDrukarsh.com. We've done over 50 episodes.
Congrats.
And my approach to this, kind of similar to yours, I wanted to interview people who had been successful in real estate. And my guests have been developers. I've had a few people from like Selling Sunset, $1 Million Listing New York, people who are well-known from the entertainment and real estate side, Daniels Corporation. Even this, Gary, I did an episode with Bob Goldberg, who is the CEO of NAR, 1,600,000 agents.
That's incredible. Wow.
It puts the Canadian market in, and the people in the business on the organized side. Tim Hudak's been a guest many times. I don't know if you had him on.
Yeah, I just had him on last week.
Isn't he great?
He's phenomenal.
He's turned around the RIA to where they really are the spokesperson for the real estate industry. The boards have some interest and some influence, but Tim's done a phenomenal job.
He has.
I had been on the RICO board, so I understand how RICO works. But on my own podcast, what I loved about it was, I said, Adam, do you want to do this? Or do you want to interview this person or that person? We just decide.
Yes.
And what's nice, and you'll see this as you do more, or you may already have it, the more podcasts you do, the easier it is to get guests.
Yes.
And that is so flattering, isn't it?
It is. Where now people are reaching out to you,
right.
And you're trying to pick and choose who do you want, when to put them on.
Yeah, it's much fun.
It is so much fun. And I said this before, I started the podcast because I thought I knew enough to start teaching people, but the podcast has taught me way more than I've taught other people.
In what way?
In learning from them, listening to some of the pitfalls that they made in their lives, not getting too caught up in the business, but smelling the roses along the way.
Right.
Because why are you doing it for your friends and your family and your spouse? So be careful. Don't just do it for accolades. Remember why you're doing what you're doing.
And you're really good at that. I know you, and I know that that's an important part of your life.
Yes.
Right.
There's a balance.
Right. And that's a tough one. And if you can accomplish it, you're doing great. So I think if we're going to leave your viewers with any messages, I think is, you and I tried to give the best information we could for people to learn, and then just wish them well.
Yes. Howard, thank you very much for being here with me.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I look to you as a mentor. And so this has been an honor to have you sitting across the table from me and having a conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well,
truly.
If I'm such a big mentor, why do I have to take the garbage out when I get home? That's I want to know the truth.
Hey, that's your boss. You got to deal with that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we can't figure that situation out in this podcast.
All right.
Maybe the next time.
All right. Thank you, Gary.
All right, Howard. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to today's show with Gary Hibbert. Please don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review and connect with your host on Instagram at Gary Hibbert. Until next time, stay mindful and remember, you don't have to be great to start. Just start, and you'll be on the path to being great.